How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Hello and welcome to or welcome back to Mystery Inc. My name is Richie. Today we've got another Fear Street book review for you, and today we're talking about book number 31, Switched. So, Switched. Let's read the blurb on the back here. She traded places with a killer. There's a little cabin in the Fear Street woods where a girl can really lose her mind. In fact, she can change it into someone else's. That's what happened to Nicole and Lucy. Now Lucy is in Nicole's body. Nicole's in Lucy's body. What a trip. But for Nicole, what a trap. Because Lucy is using Nicole's body to get away with murder. Alright, folks. Switched. This was a decent book. Wasn't my favorite, but it was pretty good. This book was absolutely unhinged, though, let me tell you, towards the end. Absolutely crazy stuff goes on, and I really can't talk about it without spoiling the book, unfortunately. So let me give you the early part of the synopsis here. So we have Nicole and Lucy. Nicole just, well, she gets broken up with by her boyfriend. I forget what his name was. He's not important. We only see him really in the first scene of the book, and then he just kind of disappears. We don't see him again, which is kind of surprising to me. But so then Nicole's feeling really bad about her life, just in general, not just with the breakup and stuff, but just a whole lot of things have led up to it. And she ends up going outside of the school. It's at the end of the day, and she ends up having a chat with her friend Lucy, who also isn't super happy with everything. And Nicole just, she wants something to change. And so Lucy suggests that they switch bodies. And there isn't really any surprise or any confusion or anything like this. They just end up going out into the Fear Street woods, and Nicole is a little bit confused. I guess she's asking, like, is this really possible? Can we do this? Why would Lucy want to trade lives with me? I have such a bad life. This, that, and the other. And they end up going to this place called they call it the Changing Wall, which is something that really confused me based on the blurb. Unless I misunderstood something or misread something at the beginning, there's no cabin. So I don't know what they're talking about here with a cabin. Although I did find it interesting that there's a cabin referenced and body switching and stuff, which is very similar to a Goosebumps book. Yeah, I shouldn't spoil it. I'm not going to give you the title if you don't already know. But I thought that was really interesting. And I'm kind of curious, actually, to see when did this book come out, because I need to check and compare that to the Goosebumps book I'm thinking of. This was printed in May of 95. And, okay, the book I'm thinking of from Goosebumps came out in June of 95. So, right about the same time. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, anyway. So they end up climbing up on top of this wall. Lucy explains that this thing was built a long time ago, and people used to use it, or these people that constructed it or knew about it used to force people to switch bodies, and so they end up climbing up on top. They hold hands and jump off, and when they land, Nicole is in Lucy's body and Lucy's in Nicole's body. Very surprised, but they're also very happy. So they end up going back to their respective bodies' houses. So Nicole goes back to Lucy's house. And that's where we get, the dramatic shock factor thing that we got from the back here, where she walks in and finds that Lucy's parents have been murdered, slashed up, they're dead in the living room. And she absolutely just completely freaks out. And, she doesn't call the police or anything because she's completely freaked out. She thinks she needs to tell Lucy what happened first before she goes to the police for some reason. Not a very smart decision, but so she ends up running away, runs back to her home where Lucy should be, but the house seems to be deserted. There's no car in the driveway. Everybody's gone. She doesn't know what's going on. So she ends up trying to figure out where she should go next. She ends up going to Lucy's boyfriend's house, Kent, who for some reason surprisingly recognizes her as Nicole, even though she's in Lucy's body. She doesn't understand. She assumes that Lucy must have come and seen him and told him, that they switched bodies already beforehand. Um, and so, Kent is, really worried about Nicole because she's, freaked out. And so he tells her to sit down. He's going to go, like, get her a glass of water or something like that. She ends up overhearing him that he's calling somebody to come and see her, come and get her. And she's worried that it's going to be like the police or something. So she freaks out and she runs away before Kent can stop her. She ends up, wandering around for a bit. She goes back to Lucy's house and goes into Lucy's bedroom looking to get some clothes to change because she's all dirty and like her clothes are torn up from running around. She finds that, for some strange reason, all of Lucy's clothes are gone. And she's starting to put together that Lucy, killed her parents and then was trying to frame Nicole for the murder. She finds like a murder note and the knife like stabbed into Lucy's dresser. But then she ends up seeing that there's a knock on the door and there's these two what seem to be police detectives outside, and she ends up running away from them and she goes through this whole thing and escapes. She ends up eventually finding Lucy very briefly at like a pizza parlor in town or something like that, and she's with a couple of their other mutual friends whose names I forgot. They don't play a very big part of the story, but anyway, she goes there to confront them, realize that Lucy somehow disappeared between her seeing her in the window and coming inside. And these two girls from school also recognize her as being Nicole. So Nicole is really confused because Lucy's going around telling everybody, about the switch, even though it was supposed to be a secret. And obviously, she's betrayed because Lucy's trying to frame her for murder. So she ends up running away again before these girls can stop her or call somebody to pick her up again. Anyway, this continues on and on and on until she eventually finds her way up to Lucy's grandmother's house. Thinking that that's got to be the only place that Lucy would have gone to hide because she hasn't been able to find her anywhere. She's not around town, around Shadyside. And let's just say, some things happen there and things just completely go off the rails at the end of this book. And I'm not going to say anything else about it. If you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil it for you. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here. Now, if you don't want spoilers, or if you haven't read the book already, go ahead and take a pause here and go ahead and skip to my star rankings. Okay, if you're still here, then I'm assuming that you've already read this book or that you don't care about spoilers. So I will say that the twist did not surprise me here. I called this twist, I don't know exactly where it was, maybe halfway through the book when the car crash is mentioned and she talks about how she, stayed with Lucy in the hospital this whole time and she feels really betrayed. That's when I kind of pieced it together that, that Lucy wasn't around here and that this was all in Nicole's head. And I will say that, at the end when she's at the farm visiting her grandmother and Kent shows up after he was supposed to be dead, I really started to question if I had guessed correctly, which it turns out that I did, obviously. And the whole thing with this all stemming from Nicole having this traumatic event with her friend dying in a car crash. It was really heavy and it was really, like I said, it was really intense at the end there. And that cliffhanger at the ending where she says she's doing better because Lucy comes and sees her every day. That I was just like, whoa, okay, I see where this is going. But so yeah, crazy stuff. But all right, yeah, I will say that this was pretty well written. It wasn't my favorite book, but it was really well written. I really, it wasn't my favorite thing in the world, but I really appreciated the way that it was written, with this being not really something supernatural, but just like a portrayal of someone dealing with some like pretty serious PTSD. It was very heavy. Again, it was pretty thought provoking again, and it was just a good overall read. Not one of my favorites, but a good overall read. So let's go and get into my star rankings here now. Here we are, switched. As you can see, this got kind of a middle of the road score for me. It wasn't a bad book by any means. It was pretty good. It wasn't my favorite. So characters, I went ahead and gave it 3.5 stars, and let me explain why. Now, obviously, we only have a couple of main characters here. We have Nicole, we have Lucy, we have Kent, and then there's a couple of other minor characters like Lucy's grandmother and the friends from school that show up. So I mostly base this just around Nicole, since she's primarily, the person we're following around. Everyone else, including Lucy, really only has a very minor, what do you say? Minor, only shows up briefly. Let's go with that. I don't know what I was trying to say there, but so I did knock just a little bit off for kind of the way that Lucy behaves. Like, obviously, we know what her motivation is. She's trying to get away with murder here, but there's no real motive, I should say, as to why she's doing this and why she's doing this to her friend. And so I knocked just a hair off that, like a half star off that. And then Nicole was a fine character, but she made some pretty dumb decisions. Like, a couple instances where she comes across a dead body, especially at the beginning when she finds Lucy's parents, and she, again, same thing with the wrong number. She should have immediately called 911, explained what happened. But again, there would be no plot really if that happened. Probably. She makes some other dumb decisions, like when she goes to confront what's his name, Kent. After the second time she goes to see him, she makes some pretty dumb decisions there. I'm not going to spoil that again. So I knocked a star off just for some pretty bad decision making. Which, to be fair, the ending of the book kind of makes that make a little bit more sense. But I'm judging this based on just the overall story here. So 3.5 stars for characters. As far as the atmosphere in the book goes, I only gave it 2 stars, which may be a little bit harsh. There wasn't a whole lot of atmosphere. I mean, there was some, you feel some pretty intense anxiety, I guess, from what Nicole's dealing with running back and forth here. But, there's not a whole lot of else to it. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm speaking very strangely tonight. Phrasing things very strangely. I don't know. I just didn't feel like a very atmospheric book to me. Obviously, you have the beginning part is pretty heavy with, and the ending is also pretty heavy with, the things that are happening at the barn, and then at the beginning, the things that are happening in the woods at the changing wall. I knocked it down a little bit also because, like I said on the blurb, there's some anticipation that there's going to be this cabin and some kind of thing going on with that has to do with the changing. There's no cabin; it's just this wall, and I don't know. There's just, I really don't know how to explain it. It just didn't hit very well for me on atmosphere. I don't know how that would have been improved exactly. I'd have to really sit and think about that, but yeah. And again, things were pretty obvious as what was going on leading into the plot here, which I gave three stars. And the reason I gave it 3 stars, the plot wasn't terrible. Could have been a little bit better, like I said, if we had a bit more motivation for, a little more backstory on Lucy and why she was doing this. The twist, I called, like I said, pretty much halfway through the story. I did doubt myself a couple times with it towards the end of the book, but I didn't end up guessing correctly what happened, so I knocked it down a little bit on the twist there. Mostly for that. As far as the pacing and intrigue goes, the pacing was fine for the most part. I mean, the beginning of the book was a bit slow, and kind of like the early middle part was also a little bit slow, where, it's mostly just about Nicole being confused about what's going on and freaking out, and it wasn't the most intriguing story. It wasn't particularly bad or anything either, but there were a few moments in the story which kind of felt like it was just slowing down for no reason, or just not going anywhere. Like the wheels were spinning, which improved the farther the book went along. So I just gave it a 3-star on that. Overall enjoyment for the book, yeah, I give it 3.5 stars. That might be a little bit harsh. I did enjoy the story pretty well. I kind of like the overall idea of it, but at the same time, I don't know. It wasn't as good as other books in the series that I've read so far. And there were a couple of moments that just, I don't know. I just didn't care for too much, and like the ending was very heavy, and it was well written, like I said, but it was also kind of I can't really say anything else without spoiling it. Those of you who watched the spoiler section of the video, you'll understand where I'm going, but it was just very heavy. So yeah, I give it 3.5 stars, which gave me an overall score of 3.2, which is right around middle of the road, 3 stars. Yeah, it was a decent book. It's not one of my favorites from the series so far, but it's actually got a relatively decent score here at 3.2 out of 5. And let's go ahead and drop that into the ranking here, and we'll see where it landed. All right, here we are with the Fear Street ranking currently, and as you can see, we're in, what was that, 5th place here, just below Lights Out and just above College Weekend. Yeah, it was an okay middle of the road book. I might have been a little bit harsh on the atmosphere and maybe even a little bit harsh on the enjoyment. Let me know your thoughts. Have you read this one? If you did you enjoy it? Again, try not to spoil anything. If there's people browsing the comments that haven't read it and don't want to be spoiled, but let me know your thoughts overall on the story and on Fear Street overall in general, if this is somehow your first video with me. And any suggestions on what Fear Street book I should read next? I'm leaning towards maybe Lights Out. That was one that I really, was looking forward to picking up and reading. So if I don't get any suggestions, I'll probably do that one. But give me your thoughts. It's going to be a week or two before I get to the next Fear Street book, probably, because we've got... what do we have coming up next? I think we're doing Crow Files Book 2 next, which is Year.book. Even though that's book 2 in the series, it'll be like the 4th one I've read, or the 5th one I've read. Yeah. And then after that, we're probably going to do the first book from Fear Factory, which was, what's that one called? I forgot. It had to do with a circus. Or Trapping the Creepy Carnival. That's probably going to be the book we're going to do next after Year.book. And then after that, we'll probably get into another Goosebumps book, probably something from Series 2000. It's been a little while since I did one of those. I do also want to get back to a little bit of the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew. I read The Tower Treasure from Hardy Boys, the revised edition. I want to go back and read the original unrevised edition and compare and contrast those. And then I haven't touched any Nancy Drew books in quite a while. It's been over a year, actually, since I read one. It was long before I started the channel. I want to get another one of those, and then, yeah, I don't know where we're going to go from there. Maybe we'll start a Ghosts of Fear Street book, too, just so we can get a little bit of all of the middle-grade horror that I've got, some flavor going on there. Maybe we'll try another book, too, that's not horror or mystery-themed. I've only got a couple of those, but maybe just for a little bit of a palate cleanser, because I've been reading stuff like this and Goosebumps, nonstop for over a year, almost a year and a half at this point. But anyway, I'm rambling on now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts. We'll catch you in the next video. Have a great rest of your day. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.